Subscribe for more stories and show your support by giving this video a thumbs up. Pippin and the Song of the Silver Moon, a Nightingale's first composition. In the melody forest, where ancient oak trees hugged the sky and the wind whispered with the leaves, there was a truth known to all: the princes of this forest were the nightingales. When they opened their beaks, rivers stopped flowing, the wind fell silent, and the stars burned brighter. Right in the most secluded corner of this forest, on the branch of a plane tree, lived a tiny nightingale named Pippin. Pippin had not yet sung that famous, legendary nightingale song. His feathers were the sweetest shade of brown, his eyes shone like black beads, but the only sound that came out of his beak was a weak chirp. Pippin's father, Maestro, was the forest's most famous tenor. Maestro warbled so magnificently every midnight that even the owls at the other end of the forest would wake up to listen. Pippin admired his father, but he also felt a great fear. What if I can't do it? Pippin thought. What if there is no music inside me? What if I am a sparrow born as a nightingale by mistake? These questions sat like a heavy stone in Pippin's tiny heart. Spring had arrived. The melody forest was waking up. This meant the great night concert was approaching. Every young nightingale would land on the highest branch of their tree on the first full moon and give their first song to the forest. This was a coming-of-age ceremony. Pippin watched the other birds. Blue jays were joking among themselves, shouting, "Squawk! Squawk!" Woody the woodpecker was like the drummer of the forest with his rat-a-tat-tat rhythm. Golden orioles hummed cheerful melodies with their flute-like thin voices. Everyone had a voice, a duty. Pippin, on the other hand, just listened. His mother, Luna, landed next to Pippin. She stroked her son's back with her wing. "Why are you so quiet, my little knight?" "I'm scared, Mom," said Pippin. "There is a huge knot in my throat. My voice trembles when I try to sing. I can't boom like Dad." Luna smiled. "You don't have to be like your dad, Pippin. A song doesn't come from the throat. A song comes from the heart. Close your eyes and listen to the forest. Your song is hidden somewhere in there." The next morning, Pippin woke up early. The sun hadn't risen yet, the forest was under a grey mist. He went to a distant bush where no one could hear him. He had to practice. He took a deep breath. He puffed out his chest. He mimicked his father's stance and opened his beak. Squeak! The sound that came out resembled the creaking of a rusty door hinge. Pippin looked around in shame. Fortunately, no one was there. He tried again. Ruick! This time his voice sounded like a frog with a cold. Just then, a giggling sound was heard from behind the bush. It was Nutty the squirrel. "Hey Pippin," said Nutty, gnawing on the acorn in his hand. "Did your stomach just growl, or did you sing?" Pippin's face turned bright red under his feathers. "I was just clearing my throat," he lied. "Good," laughed Nutty. "Because for a moment, I thought a new duck had moved into the forest." Pippin lowered his head and walked away. Despair had settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. When evening came, Pippin went to visit Barnaby the owl, the oldest and wisest of the forest. Barnaby was dozing in his hollow, which smelled like an old library. "Mr. Barnaby," whispered Pippin. The owl opened one eye. "But I was bright and yellow like the moon." "Ah, little Pippin. It is surprising for you to be up at this hour. Or have you lost your sleep? I can't find my voice, said Pippin. I want to sing, but I don't know what to sing. Notes fly around in my mind, but they don't come out of my beak. Barnaby adjusted his glasses, which were actually the feathers around his eyes. Listen, Pippin, he said in his hoarse voice. Music isn't just about making noise. Music is painting the silence. You are constantly trying to speak. You must learn to listen first. Listen to what? Everything, said Barnaby. The whistle the wind makes as it passes through the leaves. The plop sound a raindrop makes when it hits the lake. Your own heartbeat. The song isn't outside, it is in the sum of those sounds. Pippin didn't fully understand these words, but a light had turned on in his head. He shouldn't rush. He just had to feel. The next day, Pippin stopped trying to sing. Instead, he did what the owl said, he listened. He landed on the bank of the crystal river. He listened to the sound of water hitting the stones, splash, gurgle, bubble. This sound had a rhythm. Then the wind picked up. The leaves of the poplar trees clashed against each other, whoosh, whoosh. This sound had a sadness. A thunderclap was heard in the distance, boom. This sound had power. Pippin absorbed these sounds. It was as if the forest was giving him a secret music lesson. The knot inside him began to loosen slowly. He wasn't afraid anymore, just curious. How could he combine these sounds? He began to hum to himself. Not loudly, just a vibration coming from his throat. Fluid like water, light like the wind. Hum hum tira-lum. This wasn't a real song, but for the first time, his voice hadn't cracked. And finally, that night arrived. The full moon shone like a giant silver tray hung in the sky. The forest was bathed in blue light. The air was cool and smelled of jasmine. All the forest residents had gathered around the great oak. Rabbits, deer, squirrels, and of course, other birds. Everyone was there to listen to this year's young nightingales. First up was Pippin's cousin, Echo. Echo took the stage and sang a song that was technically flawless but a bit emotionless. Everyone applauded. Then others came up. Some sang at a very high pitch, some too fast. When it was Pippin's turn, a deep silence fell over the forest. His father, Maestro, was looking at him from the front branch with pride and a little anxiety. His mother, Luna, gave him courage with her eyes. Pippin landed on the highest branch. When he looked down, he saw thousands of eyes focused on him. His knees trembled. His throat went dry. It was as if he had forgotten everything he knew. Nutty the squirrel whispered from below, "Come on, duck, show yourself." Pippin closed his eyes. He wanted to run away. He wanted to open his wings and disappear into the darkness. Just then, there was movement in the sky. A meteor entering the atmosphere glided in a bright line. A shooting star. It was so bright, so fast, and so silent. Pippin forgot everything in that moment. His fear, his father, the audience, Nutty. He focused only on that beauty. An indescribable feeling rose inside him. This feeling was joy, this feeling was sadness, this feeling was admiration. And this feeling wanted to come out. Pippin opened his beak without thinking. The first sound that came out of Pippin was a long and smooth whistle. Clear and luminous, just like that shooting star. The forest was surprised. This wasn't the trembling voice they expected. Pippin continued. He wasn't thinking anymore, just feeling. He remembered the murmur of the river, and his voice began to pour out like a waterfall, lululululu. Then he remembered the sadness of the wind, his voice deepened, becoming soft as velvet. Then he remembered the thunder and delivered a powerful finale, chio-chio-vet. His voice reached every corner of the forest. Even the insects among the leaves stopped to listen. Pippin's song was not a memorized sequence of notes. It was a translation of everything happening in the forest at that moment. It was moonlight turned into sound. Pippin had opened his wings slightly while singing. His body swayed with the rhythm of the music. He had never felt so big, so free. He was no longer a tiny, brown bird. He was the voice of the night. Pippin ended his final note with a thin timbre stretching towards the sky. When the sound stopped, the ghost of that melody still roamed the forest. For a few seconds, there wasn't a sound. The silence was so intense that Pippin thought he had done something wrong. Then, first, the rustling of leaves was heard. Then, old Barnaby the owl's hoarse voice appreciated him with a hoo-hoo. And then the whole forest erupted. Squirrels clapped their hands, paws. Other birds accompanied him by flapping their wings. Even the wind applauded him by shaking the branches. Pippin opened his eyes. He was breathless, but his heart felt as light as a feather. His father, Maestro, flew to his side. There were tears in his eyes. "It was more beautiful than my songs," said his father. "Because this was your song, Pippin. Not someone else's." His mother, Luna, smiled and said, "I told you so. I told you it was in your heart." The concert was over, the crowd had dispersed. The silver moon was slowly leaving its place to the first grey lights of the morning. Pippin was tired. Singing required much more energy than he had guessed. He retreated to his own branch, under that safe plane tree leaf. Nutty the squirrel called out from the next tree, "Hey Pippin. Okay, I admit it. You're not a duck. Maybe you could be a bit of a king." Pippin giggled. "Good night, Nutty." Pippin tucked his head under his wing. The knot in his throat was completely gone. He knew who he was now. He was a storyteller who turned the forest's stories into sound. He was a nightingale. He would sing again tomorrow evening. Maybe the song of the rain, maybe the song of a blooming flower. But now it was time to sleep. As the melody forest fell silent, the tiny nightingale Pippin fell into a deep and peaceful sleep, ready to dream of new notes. The end.